So I was fooling around, messing around, looking at stuff, and I realized I had my two 6309s in front of me. And I was like, oh, well, that's neat. I can maybe talk about it because one's an early and one's a late. Sometimes people ask me, you know, what's the deal, the early and the late? So the real differentiator between early and late is the early ones were made starting in the late 76, and they were made all the way up to the beginning of 1981, through like spring and a little into summer. They were sort of transitioning over, and then they were made in Hong Kong from Japanese parts. There's no difference between the watches in how they're made or their quality or the movement. They're absolutely the same. The things that changed were some minor case details, but the biggest tell for a 77 is what I call the 77 lume, the 77 tan dial lume. And what the deal is with this, these came this way, the first 6309s and the first 6306s, when they started in late 1976, or later 1976. And this color lume, they all had this color lume, brighter or darker. And so this continued right up probably all the way through 77 and a good bit of the way into 78. But then once that changed, you went to, this is a later dial, so it's a little more flat printed. The intermediary dials, I wonder if I can dig one up. They have sort of, they're sort of more puffy like this, but they're white, sort of a bone ivory white. So my theory about this, there was another model being made during this same time with this dial color that also had this dial color, the 6159 7010 grandfather tuna. Every single one of them that I've ever seen or even seen pictured had this gold tan lume. And when they discontinued that watch, that's when these dials changed. So I think they were being made on the same line. I don't know why the grandfather tuna, somebody decided to put sort of this yellowish lume on it, but they did. It's crazy, but it makes the 77s distinct. The other thing is that while you always get this tan dial lume, if you have this tan dial lume, it will always have flat white lume hands. Always. If you ever see one of these and it's got hand lume that's the same color as the dial, no. The hand should match the pip. Now, as I'm sure all of you have noticed, well, I keep saying this is a 77, with a 77 case back, I'm sure you've all noticed that it's a small cutout crown, and that's not correct for a 77, and I'll say you're absolutely right. This is a service replacement case made in 1981, and the original case back to it, which I have, has a sticker on it, and it says, Japanese parts assembled in Hong Kong. So yes, you're correct. The early cases, the crown cutout was bigger. Let me see, I've got a good example here. This is a genuine 77 case. Somebody had a problem with their click ball, and so they just drilled it out from the back. I've had this case for I don't even know how long. So any case, it's just the case cutout, which is this bit right here. See these sort of flanges and how deep they go? This is a much later case. Let me get this together. This is a much later case, and if you can see, it's much shallower, and it's far closer in. So whenever I look at a watch, because I've seen them with significantly bigger cutouts than that. But that's a real big tell if you really develop an eye for it. And I think the main difference really is just how much material they removed. Most of them kind of hover in between. Again, that's an 81 case, and that's a pretty decent sized cutout. Wow. Actually, that's a pretty good one. See, look, I'm even educating myself. Okay, so this is another Hell, this case has a bigger cutout crown cutout than even this one does. Huh. I wonder when this case was made. I mean, just because they shipped it in whatever the heck time, because they shipped all their 6309 stuff down to Hong Kong, and I'm sure they would, if they hadn't leftover material, they would have shipped it down too. I wonder if this is an early case somehow that ended up in one of these later service cases. I don't know, it's interesting. If anybody has any information on that, please let me know. So anyway, so this one, you can see again, it's thinner. There's not as much material removed. I'd say that one's bare still. I don't think I know what I'm talking about. The one thing about the big crown cutout thing, it's not 100%. Sometimes you see them late, sometimes you see them early, but these cutouts were done by hand. A lot of this casework, even today, like Grand Seiko, which was Suwa, they do their case finishings by hand, and so you will see variations, but that big cutout I associate with an early case. So anyway, I don't know, that's pretty much about it. You can tell this is what late is this one? No, that's June 81. You'll see the dial is a different color. It's sort of a lighter sort of ashy gray, more flat printed. It still has the hash sort of screen printing for the lume. And the dial printing's exactly the same. Internally, the movements are identical. There's absolutely no difference at all. But interestingly, you'll notice it still has Japan on the dial. At least I think that's what it says. I'm gonna pull my magnifiers. Yep, see, still says Japan. Not yet says Hong Kong. It's a pretty watch. Such a timeless design. You'll notice, by the way, these are both in their original straps, and that's fun. I don't really wear these out of the house, so you know, it's one of these things where I'm just like, I'll leave the original GL831 on. Oh yeah, you got a GL. Look at that. You got a slight length difference. Not much, but some. I wonder what that's about. Okay, well, I think that's about all the fun we're going to have for 6309s tonight.